Our coordination with Manila across the board, but including on Second Thomas Shoal, is unprecedented and has really been revolutionized in recent months. And I think our top line answer would be one of tremendous praise for our Philippines allies and their handling of an incredibly challenging situation in their own exclusive economic zone over the course of last year. President Marcos and his team have handled the situation with extraordinary resolve, have handled it responsibly, steadily, and again, in incredibly close coordination with the United States. And from the Philippines' perspective, part of that has been an effort to take the temperature down through some very responsible bilateral diplomacy with the PRC, and we commend that instinct as well. As you referenced, Zach, there has been an announcement that out of their bilateral coordination mechanism, they have reached an understanding about future resupplies at Second Thomas Shoal. But we want to be very clear about where the United States stands on this issue, and that is very much with our Philippines allies. In no uncertain terms, it is the case under international law that Second Thomas Shoal lies in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. That was recognized by the Permanent Court of Arbitration 8 years ago this month, and because of that, the PRC has no lawful claim to the waters around 2TS. Additionally, as the National Security Advisor said out at Aspen this weekend, the United States continues to stand ready to do whatever is necessary to support the Philippines on this issue and more broadly. And as we've been clear so many times, including up to the president's level in the Rose Garden on multiple occasions, the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty applies to the South China Sea and applies to public vessels, including those of its Coast Guard. So the applicability of our Mutual Defense Treaty is crystal clear. What we are looking to do across the board, and Eli can speak much more to this, is to bolster our Philippines allies' capabilities and ability to continue to operate lawfully in its waters and to stand up to the types of challenges that it has faced in recent months. And we think that we're well on our way to doing that. This alliance is really firing on absolutely every cylinder, and just a few years ago, its future was incredibly uncertain. So as we look to Second Thomas Shoal or any number of other features that lie near the Philippine shores and at which it sees increasing contest from the PRC, we're taking a holistic perspective to bolster Manila and our partnership with Manila however we can. And you'll see a lot of those important steps in one announcement in particular coming out of the 2+2 that will light the way.
But if we're being really honest here, the most important business we have to do is manage the challenges that we face. We talked about the challenges in the maritime domain. That's quite clear. We're deeply concerned about China's ongoing aggressive and destabilizing support of Russia's illegal, unprovoked war against Ukraine, particularly China's support for the Russian defense industrial base. We certainly have a range of concerns about steps that China is taking to increase pressure on Taiwan and to direct coercion at Taiwan in ways that threaten to undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. And then there are a range of economic and trade measures that China continues to carry out that we believe are unfair and distortionary. So that hopefully gives you a sense of what an agenda would look like should the Secretary and Wang Yi have a chance to sit down together. My single favorite line that I've heard on China is from National Security Advisor, who always talks about intense competition with China requires intense diplomacy. We do believe in that. We don't apologize for the competitive relationship that we have and the competitive actions that we take vis-a-vis China to advance our national interests. But I do want to reassure everybody here, and we reassure friends in the region, we are going to conduct this competition in the most responsible way possible, and we're going to reassure our allies and partners of that fact, and I think that will be reassuring across the region.
It's a really important question. I think important to rewind the tape a little bit to what the relationship with India looked like 5 years ago, and the answer is nothing like what it looks like today, right? For our Indian friends, the clash in the Himalayas that took place in 2020 with the PRC was a transformative moment in their strategy and in their foreign policy. And it's hard to understate how significant that was. In the years since, we have seen our relationship, certainly on security and defense, but really across the board, with India absolutely transformed. And you can see that on a bilateral level, where, of course, the president's state visit with Modi last year announced some really unprecedented cooperation, certainly in the defense space, but also in the critical and emerging technology space. You can see that on the minilateral level, where India is in many ways the driving force behind the Quad, not only helping to set the agenda, but carving out space for new and different types of projects that the Quad will work on together in the spirit of delivering for the region. And you can also see it in the choices that our Indian friends make in terms of their own partnerships around the region, many of which have nothing to do with us. As Eli was describing before, increasingly closer ties with East Asia, with Japan, with Australia, with Vietnam, and even some recent statements in favor of the Philippines in light of the pressure that they are facing in the South China Sea. So I really do think the shifts that we have seen in New Delhi are incredibly significant, and the partnerships that we have been able to build as a result, again, would have been just impossible to imagine 5 years ago. That said, what we are seeking to build is a long-term partnership, and we are not expecting sort of revolutionary change to occur overnight. Not every partner needs to be exactly the same in terms of their orientation, and there is not one sort of single archetype for the end state in either a bilateral partnership with the United States or in the way that we engage in our minilaterals. So mostly when we look at India, we look at this incredible amount of progress that we have been able to make together, even as there are clearly some alignment patterns that we do not share. But I'll pass it to Eli.
And I think we're making great progress in that regard, and spoke a little bit earlier to Corey's question about some of the new capabilities that we're putting into the region to deal with some of those challenges and to reinforce deterrence. Second, you mentioned force posture. We are in the process of making our force posture in the Western Pacific more distributed, more mobile, more resilient, and more lethal, and all of that will contribute to deterrence. And then finally, you mentioned the part related to allies and partners. Dan and I were on the stage, I believe in Brookings last year. I really liked what he said insofar as the entire world has a stake in peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and I think we are seeing the manifestation of that in our private and public diplomacy every day in terms of more and more countries around the world expressing the importance of maintaining stability in the Taiwan Strait. So that's a really important part of the deterrence equation. But as you mentioned, absolutely, Taiwan has a role in that as well, including in bolstering their own resilience, not just from a military perspective, but from a whole of society perspective. And I'm encouraged by the trend lines on that issue. And in terms of their own efforts as it relates to the Taiwan military to make sure they have the right plans, capabilities, exercises to strengthen deterrence and to maintain peace and stability. So I think we're on a very strong trajectory on all those regards.
As folks are well tracking, Putin recently paid a visit to Pyongyang, and in many ways, that visit between Kim and Putin cemented what has been taking place over the course of this last year, which is a really unprecedented level of cooperation between the DPRK and Russia, which is extremely troubling to us and should be worrisome to any country or individual who sees a stake in peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific or in the Euro-Atlantic. And we see in many ways this relationship as a paradigm of the increasing links between the two regions, as the DPRK has sold missiles and ammunition to Russia for battlefield use in Ukraine, and the use of those munitions are well documented. But also, as Russia clearly provides both political support, technical assistance, cash, and other forms of bolstering of the Kim regime to North Korea in exchange for its battlefield support. Now, in the early months of that relationship, one might have been able to make an argument that perhaps this was a transactional relationship, perhaps that once Russia no longer needed the DPRK on the battlefield in Ukraine to supplant its stores, that perhaps the political relationship would fade too. But with Putin's visit and with the alliance-like agreement that they have signed, I think it is very clear that the DPRK and Russia have bought into a longer-term partnership that we have to reckon with as a fundamental force in both regions. Now, the silver linings that we could point to in this. Number one, unprecedented Japan ROK US cooperation to monitor this relationship and to coordinate policy to do our best to oppose and undermine it where we can. We have unprecedented intelligence sharing, unprecedented cooperation on sanctions, unprecedented cooperation on how we deal with this issue at the UN, and increasingly, and here's a second silver lining, unprecedented engagement from European partners who also want to do what they can to bolster both regions against this partnership. And that was on full display at NATO. But nonetheless, it truly presents an unprecedented challenge, and the main concern is, of course, that with Russian access to cash and technical advice, North Korea is the least isolated that it has been in a very long time. And so that is something that we must all be worried about and cooperate against. Nonetheless, the United States remains open to diplomacy. If the Kim regime should decide that they want to talk now, today, without preconditions about anything, we're prepared to do so because we think that diplomacy can play a responsible role in managing the risks that we see here. But we remain laser focused on deepening our cooperation, in particular with our Japanese and ROK counterparts on all issues related to North Korea, and again, to increasingly folding in our European partners who see their stake as well.